Today, really inspired by the portions of the week, I want to focus on the quality that maybe most people aspire to have, and that's leadership. How do you become a leader? What does it mean to be a leader? Who are the biblical portraits of true leaders? That's really what I want to explore today. And I want to learn the quality of leadership, mainly from Moses, who is now our best friend from last week's portion until the very end of the Torah. We mention him 628 times in the Torah. He is the person who's mentioned the most in the whole Tanakh, in the whole Bible. So certainly there's much to learn from Moses, but certainly his quality of leadership. And I want to divide this quality into three different ingredients, all three that we learn again from Moses himself. The first one is learned from the way Moses is introduced to us in the Torah, because it's interesting. One would want to know who Moses' family was, right? Don't you have to look at someone's family before you actually can know them fully? In fact, it says that when a person marries someone else, they should look at the family of that person too, to get a better picture of the context of where this person comes from. Does it have to determine if this person is good or not, or if he fits you or not? No, it doesn't have to, but at least it will give you a better sense of the context. Not only does it not mention who Moses' family was, but it doesn't mention which schools he went to, it doesn't mention what type of character he had, it doesn't mention his IQ score, his EQ score, it doesn't mention any of that. And of course, it shouts the question of why? Let's look at the verses themselves to see how Moses is introduced to us. It's astonishing, but it's almost as if the Torah is purposefully omitting some of the most basic information we would want to know about Moses. Does anyone want to read Exodus 2, verses 1 to 4? Anyone? Please, Hannah, go for it.
Now the men tribe of Levi was a pregnant woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the weeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him.
Okay, so listen to this. The opening. Now a man of the tribe of Levi, married a Levite woman. Doesn't even mention the names of his parents. Forget qualities, the values that his parents had in the home. That we would also want to know. But the names of the parents are not even mentioned. And then she gives birth to a son. What type of son? For Esau, for example, it mentions that he was hairy. For Jacob, it mentions that he was a complete, wholesome baby. There's no mention of Moses' qualities at all. Now, I want to go further into the story and leave that question open for a second. But if you go further into the story, we all know the story. Yocheved, the mother of Moses, places him on the Nile River, and she leaves the scene. There's one person that does stay on the scene. We just read about her. That's Miriam, right? Moses' sister, older sister. She was just 6 years old, apparently, according to the Midrash then. But she is watching him to make sure that he doesn't drown. And then she sees the daughter of Pharaoh. We know the story, right? She sees the daughter of Pharaoh, who reaches out her arm. According to the Midrash, her arm, in fact, was lengthened by about 20 meters so that she could reach Moses. A miracle happened. And she grabs Moses and she adopts him. Miriam is watching all of this, 6 years old, from behind the bushes. And then what she does is astonishing. She risks her life as a Jew who's not liked in Egypt. This is like Nazi Germany. She risks her life, goes to the daughter of Pharaoh, and says to the daughter of Pharaoh, I can find a woman here who can breastfeed this child. Why would you risk your life? Why would you do that? Your mother even left the scene. You or not? Like, what's happening here? let's read the answer of the Talmud to this question, and then we'll go back to why there's such obscurity in the Torah regarding the introduction of Moses to all of us. Let's just go to the Talmud Tractate Sota 12a. Yes.
Was Moses circumcised without point?
It's a good question. According to the Talmud, Moses was born circumcised. Born circumcised. But still, even if someone is born circumcised, you should know you still have to have what's called hatafat dam. You still have to do some type of blood pricking. That's the literal translation. Yeah, exactly. So his mother might have done it too. Yeah, sure. Okay. So why is Miriam risking her life? Let's see what the Talmud has to say about this. When Pharaoh's daughter Batya rescued baby Moses, does anyone want to read? Please. Anyone? Okay, Amy, go for it, please. Thank you.
Pharaoh's daughter agreed, and Miriam brought Yocheved, the real mother, to nurse her baby Moses. But why did Miriam even think of approaching Pharaoh's daughter with this offer?
Right.
Because that would eventually direct his speak to the Almighty should not begin life by sucking milk from an unknown and perhaps impure source. That is why Miriam suggested that she bring her and Moses' own mother, Yocheved, who was pure.
Right. This is the answer given to why Miriam risked her life. She saw Moses as nothing less than a prophet, someone who would eventually speak to God. Did she know that at the age of 6? I'm not sure. But I believe that this is the way she was educated, to see every baby as a potential prophet. So what does she do? She risks her life to go and tell the daughter of Pharaoh, hey, I have someone to nurse him. Because she wanted that person, that baby who is bound to speak with God one day, to at least drink his milk from a pure source. And then she brings Yocheved, her own mother, to feed Moses, which was really just genius from Miriam's standpoint, especially at this age of 6. But this also provides the answer to why the Torah doesn't tell us who Moses' parents were, what their names were, which family he came from. Because what the Torah is trying to teach us is that regardless of where you come from, you too might be a potential prophet. Regardless of the values that you were brought on, you too might be a potential prophet. Regardless of what the names of your parents are, you too might be a potential prophet. Because every baby born is a potential prophet. And if we look at that baby as a potential prophet, he might just grow up to become indeed a potential prophet. Miriam looked at her own baby brother as a potential prophet, and so he became a real prophet. The Torah doesn't present to us who his parents were to tell us that even if you see a baby who might come from the worst of sources, from the worst of families, that baby too should be looked at as a potential prophet. I think this year, in this anonymous family, we find the secret to Jewish education, because every one of us has a divine soul. Every one of us, therefore, can be a divine being growing up. But the question is how that person is treated. If a person is treated just as a human being, or worse, as an animal soul, because that we also have, then eventually that may be how a person grows up to become. But if a person is treated as a divine being, then he becomes that divine being, and he might even become a real prophet. I often have parents who come to me and say, hey, I don't know what happened to my child. And then I remember not too long ago, and then I was sitting with a couple here, and the father tells me, but I already knew from a young age that this kid was trouble. So I said to myself, should have said it to him, but I don't know if it was appropriate. I said to myself, well, then why are you coming to me now? It's no wonder that he turned out to be trouble. If you viewed him as trouble from a young age, of course he'll turn out to be trouble. If you had viewed him maybe from a young age as a potential prophet, maybe you wouldn't be here sitting with me today. But very often, the way we view our own children is the way they eventually become. But if we view our own children with mouths that eventually can speak to God, with minds who can eventually prophesize God, maybe that's how they'll become. So here the Torah is introducing us to the foremost leader of the Jewish people by erasing any sign of his childhood, any context of where he came from, to teach us how to educate our own children and how to view every baby, every human being, dare I say. Because if we see greatness in people, they become great. And this might answer or provide answers for these riddling questions, which I think I've asked you in the past, but they're good reminders. Question 1, if you knew a woman who was pregnant, does anyone want to read this first riddle? And if you know the answer, don't shout it out. Yes, go for it, Robert. If you... Would you? Do you know the answer to this or not? No, you wouldn't. Okay, good. Many people might. Now, let's go to question 2, and then we'll answer question. No, I'll tell you who question 1 is referring to. Let's go to question 2. Come on. It's time to elect a new world leader, and your vote counts. Let's go. Yes. Right. By the way, not only consults with astrologers, I researched this. He also determines his policies based on astrologers' consults. Yes, go for it. Okay, good. It's candidate A. Candidate B. At least a quart of whiskey. Yes. Candidate C.
He's a vegetarian, doesn't smoke, drinks an occasional beer, and hasn't had any extramarital affairs. Which of these candidates would be your choice?
Okay, so let's go to this riddle first. If you picked candidate A, then you picked Franklin Roosevelt. If you picked candidate B, you picked Winston Churchill. If you picked candidate C, which is the candidate maybe most people would pick based just on these facts, you picked Adolf Hitler. Going back to question 1, if you said that this woman should have an abortion, then you just aborted Ludwig van Beethoven, which teaches us that yes, many people have negative qualities. Many people even have negative physical qualities. But that's not how we should see them. That's not how we should judge them. There is a divine being. There is a mouth in everyone that can potentially speak to God. Instead of focusing on all of the negativities, let's focus on the positivities, especially when it comes to our own children. And then they too can become Moses's. And in many ways, this is exactly why the Torah, again, does not give us any context. To teach us that doesn't matter what you see. It's really what there is. And what there is a divine being. And we got to cultivate that and nurture that. And then Moses's will blossom from our children and even from ourselves. That's lesson number 1 regarding the most important quality in leadership. Leaders are people who can see the souls, the divine souls in others, and can develop them and nurture them and speak to them instead of speaking to all of the peels and the context around it. Yes, Janet.
They're born, they're sponges and they take in. But they're in bad environments.
Right.
They more, need more apt to do bad things, whatever.
Right.
So everyone's born innocent.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think parents, educators can mold that being based on how they view their child. That's what we're speaking about, right? That's why it's like I feel it's so terrible when parents already label their children from a young age. Even like labels that sound like silly child, right? We say, oh, you're such a silly boy. Like, why say that? You've just framed your child into that silly frame. Or even saying, hey, you're such a bad boy. We've heard that before. Like, why? Why? You can say that your behavior wasn't right. But why frame the child? Because that eventually will frame who that child becomes. Yes. Yes, please.
Sees the child in a negative light, and as the child's growing up, what's going on?
Yeah, then they need not parental therapy, but they need marriage therapy. I think it's horrible if that happens. In fact, I want to turn your attention to another verse in the Torah that speaks about the rebellious son in the portion of Kitetze in Deuteronomy. But it's interesting to note that the rebellious son says that Eineno shoma b'kol aviv uvekol imo, that he doesn't listen to the voice of his father and to the voice of his mother. And the commentaries ask, why does the verse have to say that he doesn't listen to the voice of his father and the voice of his mother, when the verse could have simply said that the child doesn't listen to the voice of his parents? Why say the voice of his father, the voice of his mother? And the commentaries point out that that's what creates a rebellious son. When a son has two voices at home, it's not one united voice, but it's the voice of his father says one thing and the voice of his mother, then that's what creates a rebellious son. In many ways, when children have conflicting voices at home, whether conflicts like you just mentioned or other types of conflicts, that shapes the nature of your child. And we have to be very careful about that. That's what I'm saying, seriously, that they need marriage therapy. And they have to have one united voice. And that united voice better be on the side of positivity and the side of negativity, because that will also mold your child based on the voice that he hears. But you're right. I think that's a big problem, and parents have to be cognizant of that. Yes, Hannah.
Sometimes teachers think the same thing, because I remember my son, quite well. He came home and he was crying. He was in fourth grade, and he said that I'm not going to name the name of the teacher. She said blah blah blah, and I was shocked because you know how it turned out. But no, and I called her, and I was very upset because you cannot say that to a child.
For sure, yeah. Right. Right. But I will say that, yes, teachers absolutely have tremendous influence on children, but I think the greatest influence is parents, the way the child is brought up at home. That's why this applies much more to parents. Yes.
One deal with a divorce family. Mother, a certain way, father, like not in the same house.
Yeah, I mean, I think parents have to be, whether they still married or divorced, doesn't matter. They still have to have the goal of having a united voice towards their children. If they don't, then it will destroy the child. And I've said this very often to many sorts of parents, but I will say this also, that if you still don't have that, I'd like to believe, and I don't know if there are scientific researchers about this, but I'd like to believe that eventually a little bit of light expels a lot of darkness, and that the positive voice overcomes the negative voice in the mind of the child. But does it always happen? I don't know. Yes, Mindy.
As an adult, don't you find something within your soul and your intelligence to go the right route, no matter what your foundation wants, good or bad? Isn't it up to you as an adult to go the right road?
Absolutely. Not at the age of 18, at the age of Bar Bat Mitzvah. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. People blame their parents from year to tomorrow. But I do think, though, that parents still mold a lot of the personality of a child. Can even negative personalities be overcome by the people themselves? Yes. but it's much more, if you've molded your child negatively, his journey of overcoming his negativities will be much more tedious, to say the least. Can be done, sure. No, absolutely, I agree. At the end of the day, we are the masters of our own destinies. And we can't, Joseph, we've spoke about Joseph last time. Biblical character Joseph could have blamed his parents, could have blamed his siblings, could have blamed the whole world, and eventually he would have stayed a slave. But he became a vice king, particularly because he was the master of his own destiny and he chose another route. So you're right, absolutely. Yes, Linda and then Sue. Yes. Mm-hmm. Right.
Better how they raise children and not their work so much as how they live their lives.
Right.
How they're the role model. So if your parents are unkind, because some people like to act as if they're kind, but truly they're not really kindly motivated. Children can sense that.
Absolutely. Well said. Right. Absolutely. And children will sense the way that you view them. I think one of the great diseases, I would say, in America is that we educate our children. It's not a parenting class, but we can go that direction, that we educate our children out of fear, not out of love. And what I mean by out of fear is that we're always afraid, maybe because of what we see on TV or because of social media or because of what we know about our neighbors and so on, that, they're going to become drug addicts. Oh, gosh, they're going to become, high school dropouts. And we're always like acting based on our fears. No, you got to stick to that. I don't care. You're going to finish mathematics and you better do well and you better not hang out with these kids. And all because we have all these scenarios that are fear scenarios in our minds. And our children sense that. And our children are therefore undermined by that. And they feel like, you don't believe in me. You fearing that I'm going to become like that drug addict? Really? Is that how you view me, father, mother? They might not say that to you, but they certainly sense that. And that is where education starts and ends, I would even say. Not so much, I love you. No, you're destined for greatness. You're going to be the best in the world and everything. And deep inside, you don't feel it because you're afraid he's going to become like the drug addict next door. The children aren't dumb. One thing they've been blessed with, more than us adults, is incredible intuition. And they're very intuitive towards the way you view them. So as parents, let us be careful about that. Yes, Sue? No? Okay. Yes. First of all, it starts with us. Let's rewire our brains. Let's start viewing them truly as the prophets that they were meant to be, like Moses, like Miriam sees her own brother here. So it starts with us. We have a lot of work to do in here. Once we've changed everything here, I will dare say, and I've seen this, I will predict even that your children won't want to hang out with them because they'll feel that you really view them as great, so they'll want to match that. I think if we already tell them what to do and who to hang out with, we're maybe a step too late. And then that's when we have to work on ourselves. Yes.
Exactly, like you're trusting.
Right.
You believe it.
That's right.
So
absolutely.
See it on their own and make their own decisions, and you have this trust in them.
That's right. Very good. Yes.
You're saying that we don't know anything about his parents, but isn't, that's what
Yeah, but we know that from the Midrash. We don't know that from here. When Moses is born, it doesn't say he was born to Yocheved, to a woman from the tribe of Levite, a Levite woman. There you go. Where does it say that? Where? In the verse in Exodus? Thank you. Yeah, not in the Torah. Yeah, not in the Bible, not in Exodus. That's right. In the Talmud, in the Midrash, in the commentaries, yes, but not in the Torah.
So that was probably your answer.
Yes. Later on in the Torah, it does say that his mother was Yocheved, but not when he's introduced to us. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, yes,
Environment, and they turn out really well.
yeah, absolutely. We have that all the time because eventually, I think what Mindy said can determine really the type of person you become. You can blame your parents all you want, but at the end of the day, you have to master your own destiny. So, yeah,
Sometimes you learn from others.
that's right. That's right. Exactly. Okay, let's go to lesson number 2. Another perspective of leadership here. So it's interesting to note that Moses was picked by God, even though he didn't grow up in the Jewish nation. We all know that, right? I'm sure you've all seen The Prince of Egypt, which depicts how he grew up inaccurately, but still, based on some of these verses here, Moses grew up in the palace of Pharaoh. He grew up as the Prince of Egypt. He didn't grow up as a Jew, as a Jewish slave, or as a Jew who was really part of a community. Yet God picks him to become the leader. And the big question is, why pick someone who's disconnected from his own nation? Doesn't a leader need to be of the people, from the people, by the people, right? Like the United States Constitution says? No? Isn't that the simple answer, or the most basic ingredient of a leader? Let's read the Constitution. Let's go to the Constitution. The verses here, the first few verses speak about how Moses came really from the outside, how he was viewed as an outsider. When he tries to stop people from fighting, he says, hey, who are you? Who made you a ruler and judge over us? You don't even know us, right? Let's see what the Constitution says about what it means, or what a leader should have. No person except a natural born citizen. Does anyone want to read these lines? Anyone? Please. Anyone? Yeah. Right. Okay. So that's the Constitution right here. But it makes sense also because you have to know your people, the people that you are ruling. If you don't know them, if you don't know what pains them, if you don't know what makes them rejoice, then you won't know also how to rule them. Yet Moses didn't know his people before he ruled over them. In fact, finally he came out of his palace maybe to mingle with these people, and then he kills a slave master. Remember that? Trying to save a Jew, and he flees. So how much time did he really spend with these people? Not that much time. So how could he rule over them? What was God thinking? Yeah, yes. Oh, good. So we're going to read what the Ibn Ezra speaks about, which is very similar to what you're saying. Ibn Ezra was a 12th century poet, maybe one of the most important poets and rabbis of Spanish Jewry and of Jewish history altogether. And he gives us 3 answers. One of the answers is very similar to what you're saying. Answer number 1, first. Does anyone want to read? Anyone? Come on, please. Right, which is the classical Jewish answer. We don't know. We don't know. God knows. We don't know. So just accept it. That's what God wanted. All right, fine. Second answer. Right. There would have always been that classmate who said, hey, are you trying to fool Moses? I knew you as a wild child. Or that uncle who would have told him, hey, I changed your diaper. Or this. that would have undermined his leadership altogether. So that's another answer that Ibn Ezra provides. But the third one, I think, is the most dominant one here. Go for it. Right. Which, by the way, explains another very big enigma in the Torah. Because if we fast forward a few years to finally the day in which the Jews were redeemed from Egypt, the day of the grand exodus, and now they're in the desert, journeying towards the promised land, and they face the Red Sea, and then they realize that also the Egyptians are behind them, right? Remember that scene? In fact, we have a whole holiday in the Jewish calendar, the Shvi Shel Pesach holiday, the 7th day of Passover, that celebrates just that. Now, the Jewish people could have very easily said to themselves, hey, we're outnumbering this army here. There were about 3 million Jews who left Egypt. Why didn't any one of them think of fighting back? They could have won these Egyptians that were chasing them. And the answer is because they were thinking like slaves. They still had the slave mentality. Slaves don't think to fight back. They suffer what psychologists may call from the Stockholm syndrome. And they can't fight back. And so God picked Moses, because Moses didn't think like a slave, like you were saying. Moses thought like a royal being. He grew up in a palace, and God wanted someone to think like a king to save the Jewish people, so that they wouldn't be shackled by all of the mental scars that they may have. And this is really a lesson for each and every one of us. This is also how you become a leader. Sometimes you do have to think outside of the box. Sometimes you do have to believe that the impossible is possible. Sometimes you do have to say to yourself, well, it doesn't matter what my circumstances are. It does matter who sent me. And if God sent me here and God can do everything, then I can do it. It doesn't really matter. And that's how Moses thought, and that's what he tried to teach the Jewish people. Was he successful? Maybe not. And maybe that's why the generation of Egypt could not enter the promised land, because they were still slaves. They don't have the mentality of redemption that was needed for the promised land. And that's why maybe God waited for 40 years until they died, so that a new generation who could think like royal beings would enter the promised land. But at least Moses wasn't like that. And that's what he teaches us. Very often we are the slaves of our own thinking. And that's what holds us back the most. You know, that my father, and I've said this before, but I remember being completely like brainwashed about this growing up. My father's an aeronautical engineer, and he loves to use aeronautical analogies. But he would very often tell us that it's interesting, because if you look at the bumblebee scientifically cannot fly, because the mass of its body is much heavier than the tiny little wings that it has. Yet it flies. How could that be? And scientists are still grappling at the scene of the bumblebee flying. Can't fly scientifically. And the answer, he says, is very, very simple. The bumblebee doesn't know that it's not supposed to fly. So it flies. And that's one of the great lessons here. Moses didn't know that they were not supposed to come out of Egypt. We can't always try that. Yeah, I wouldn't exactly. I wouldn't think of jumping from the 12th floor thinking that maybe I don't know how to fly. I do know how to fly. But Moses, okay, and the point is that Moses knew that they could. He didn't know. Maybe according to all scientists of the day, they too were not supposed to come out of Egypt. He didn't know that. He thought like a royal being. And that should teach us about our own weaknesses too, that sometimes the reason that we can't overcome them is because we think that they are indeed more powerful than us. Yes. I don't know, because I feel too small to speak about these Jews, and I think there are a lot of unknowns from our perspective. So to judge them is a little too harsh. But I will say that there were glimmers of true leaders in the Warsaw Ghetto, from Mordechai Allouche and others, that did fight back. There was, the Warsaw Uprising and so on. And you had many individuals who took matters into their own hands and did fight back. So the generalization also is something I stay away from. But I'm sure they were also in Egypt too. There were people who did fight back, did try to escape. But the point is, again, to be a leader, we have to think like royal beings. We can't think like slaves. And that's why God picked Moses, who was that royal being, who thought big, who thought that, as Adidas says, impossible is nothing. Okay, so that's lesson number 2. And then lesson number 3, we learn from yet another observation that God had about Moses, that I think is maybe the most important quality that a person can have in life. Because Moses is now living in Midian. He escaped the wrath of Pharaoh, who wanted to kill him for killing a slave master, as we just said, right? Remember that? Moses is now living in Midian, and he's a shepherd. And apparently he's happy being a shepherd. We know that because when God calls upon him to become the leader, he refuses. He says, fine, leave me alone. But there's something that Moses did that caught the attention of God, and that almost maybe, at least according to the verses here, convinced God that Moses should be that leader. What did Moses do? Let's read the verses. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law. Now he's living in Midian in peace. He's a shepherd. Let's read about the scene. Does anyone want to read? Anyone? Please, go for it, Amy.
From the far side of the wilderness, into Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within the bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. But when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am.
And thus begins the journey of leadership by Moses. But look at what Moses did. And I think that the Torah goes out of its way here to describe exactly what he did. What he did was that he noticed that there was a bush that was burning and not consuming its own thorns. And when the Lord saw, again, I'm quoting here, that he had gone over to look, see, the Torah is going out of the way to describe this, that actually someone cared about this burning bush. That's when the Lord called to him, saying, Moses, Moses. Because on that day, there were probably many shepherds who walked by that bush, that burning bush, and they say, okay, fine, who cares? There's a burning bush, and they went on. Moses was the only one who actually turned around to see, hey, what is happening there? And when God saw that quality in Moses, that's when God said, oh, this is my leader. Moses, Moses. And what this is teaching us is that maybe the most important quality in leadership is that people are open to the surroundings. They're not just immersed in themselves and their own needs and their own selfishness. They ask all the time, what does the world around me want from me? What is it offering me? Where is my purpose, not just in here, but shouting from there? That openness, that ability to face outwards is what makes leaders leaders. Because they don't ask, in the words of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, what they need, but they ask rather what they are needed for. It's not about what I want from the world, it's about what the world wants from me. And that's why Moses is always open. Okay, where's my next opportunity? Where else can I serve? There's a burning bush here. Maybe it needs my help. Maybe I need to extinguish that fire. As simple as that. Or maybe there's going to be a voice that will be shouting at me from that burning bush. But there has to be something. So he turns around, he faces outwards, he asks himself, what does the world need from me? And that's when God says, okay, here's my leader. which teaches us really that in life, yes, we have to ask what I need and we have to ask what our basic needs. But in life, the most important quality one can have is really to serve, to ask what the world needs from me. And that's why I often say, you may have a schedule for today. You may have a plan. You may think that at the end of the day, if you checked all of the boxes in your plan, you've lived a full day. Well, you're wrong. Because it should be a 50-50 plan. 50% of what you plan for yourself, 50% of what is planned for you. Sometimes what is planned for you conflicts your plan. And then you say to yourself, no, I'm going to stick with my plan. And you think that's fine. But maybe what is planned for you is really what is needed of you, is what God wants of you. And you're just blind to it, or you're deaf to it. And then you don't become a Moses. Because the greatest lives are lives that are lived when at least 50% of our plans are given to us and we're open to them. And that's what Moses shows. I will tell you, I can tell you many, many stories, and maybe the most famous story I'm reminded of the story of Nicholas Winton that I've shared in the past. Remember the story of Nicholas Winton, where he said to himself as a stockbroker in 1938, yes, I have a ski vacation to go to in Switzerland, but I have a friend who's calling me Czechoslovakia because there are families, Jewish families, abandoned in the streets. And he said to himself, I'm going to be open to that plan. And I'm going to ask, what does the world need of me instead of what I need? I need a ski vacation. But the world needs of me to go and tend to those Jewish families. And he organized kinder transports, the story is known, to save these children who were abandoned in the streets. And he saved 660 children altogether. Today, Nicholas Winton is not known as a stockbroker from Great Britain, but he's known as a hero who saved Jewish children during the Holocaust. You know why? Because he was a Moses. He was open to what the world needed of him. That's what makes us Moseses. That's what makes us heroes. And that, I think, out of all three qualities here, that is the most important quality. Yes, we have to focus on the divine souls and the divine souls of others, especially of our children. Yes, we have to think like outsiders. And even if we think that something is impossible, we have to know that very often it is possible. But most importantly, we can't just ask what I need. We have to ask what I'm needed for.